This is Chapter 18, Discussion Number 3, Disintegration of the Soviet Empire. So the Soviet Union forced its idea of collectivization and command economies on the satellite states of Eastern Europe and also in its internal states. Workers had no incentive to productively work, and central planners were unable to respond to local needs because communism really doesn't work. The economic inferiority to capitalism of the West was becoming very obvious and had Russians jealously looking to the West and their ideas of wealth. So the Soviet Union attempted to try to keep up with the Western military power, diverting even more of their resources from the civilian populations, making them more and more jealous of how the West seemingly had everything and they had nothing. On top of that, the Soviet Union was spending a lot of military effort trying to maintain power in Afghanistan, fighting against the Mujahideen, which were the local religious warlords. Now, the United States spent a lot of time in the late 70s and early 80s helping the Mujahideen fight against the Soviets in the ways that we saw in the previous discussion. However, we can take a direct link to the Mujahideen that the United States was helping to the Taliban, which is what the United States has been opposing in Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks. So, how is the Soviet Union going to rescue itself? Leader Mikhail Gorbachev announced new policies called Glasnost and Perestroika in order to try to help save the Soviet Union from disintegrating. His ideas essentially were, first of all, to loosen against the censorship and openly tell the news of what's going on in the Soviet Union, not only to the world, but more specifically to the Russian people. His ideas of perestroika was the idea to make more private enterprise in the Soviet Union in order to help provide for itself, and more local decision-making in some of the central planning. However, we can see after Gorbachev's attempt to try to reestablish Soviet dominance is that these did not work, and they failed to save the Soviet Union. As the Soviet was showing itself unable to command the absolute respect and obedience of the countries that it had conquered, a lot of these countries started going for independence, especially when we say the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Most of these republics that the Soviet Union conquered were the first ones to leave. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan all got their independence from the Soviet Union and established themselves as separate countries. But they weren't the only ones to get their independence. Poland started the independence movement. A lot of people will point the finger to them because of their shipbuilding union named Solidarity. At least that's the English equivalent, led by a guy by the name of Walesa. Millions of Polish joined the shipbuilders union to demand economic change and political change. He got so unpopular with the Polish government that was supported by the Soviet Union that Lech Walesa was imprisoned, and unions were outlawed in Poland. But a lot of people saw this beginning to weaken control of the eastern countries. East Germany tried to ban the Soviet publications because of the Glasnost, and East Germans figured out that there was a way to get out of East Germany, and that was to go to Hungary. Hungary was still kind of a communist country, but Hungary had opened its borders with Austria. Remember that we used to be one country. So as people were starting to figure out that there was a way to get out of the communist bloc, Gorbachev started to say that the Eastern European countries could make their own decisions and that the Soviet Union would not come in and push them around. A lot of the former communist bloc were very quick to establish their independence once they knew the Soviet Union wasn't going to come in. Poland led the way, becoming a democracy, electing Lech Walesa as the president. Czechoslovakia elected a dissident writer, Václav Havel, to be president. Later, Czechoslovakia, which had been forced together by the people of World War I, they decided to split according to their nationalities and created two countries, and they did it quite amicably, and it's become the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Berlin Wall was torn down between East and West Germany and also in the city of Berlin, and those two countries started figuring out ways in order for them to unify. successfully, and we no longer have an East Germany and West Germany, but one country, Germany. West Germany companies have been working hard with the government in order to try to get East Germany up to speed because they were dreadfully behind technology-wise in East Germany. However, all of the fuzzy feelings of Eastern Europe becoming free from Soviet dominance has not been all that's been cracked up to be. In Romania, Nicolae Ceausescu refused to step down as a communist leader, so he was overthrown by citizens. He was later put on trial and executed, made it his lifelong goal to kill everyone except for his favorite people. So we didn't have a perfect transfer of power. China has reduced its communist ideology, still calls itself the communist country, but a lot of its communist ideology has, as they have become more commercial and more capitalist in its economic system. However, it is capitalist in that the country or the government of China runs the Chinese businesses and remains highly authoritarian in its nature. Economic freedom worked. They saw it with Hong Kong and Macau and the small islands that had belonged to the European powers. When they swallowed them back into China, they left them as special economic zones, and they have seen a lot of success economically there, and they have lived off of that, and they have made it more with the economic freedom in China. So capitalism wins. Cool. This concludes Discussion 3, Disintegration of the Soviet Empire. It also concludes Chapter 18, The Cold War.